Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Sunday School.
Good morning.
We're here at Christ the King Lutheran Church in Cary, North Carolina, where all are welcome, no exception. This morning we have our second generation panel, and this is our generation of boomers. Yay, boomers! And so we're thankful for their willingness to come forward to be on this panel and to answer our questions so that we can learn a little bit more about them and their generation. So I'm going to start here with Brian, and we'll go down the row. If you'll just introduce yourself and tell us when you came to CTK, and if you want to, how old you were.
Brian Hofelner, got here in 2019, moved from Illinois, and that was also the year I joined CTK, and I was 63 at the time.
Hi, I'm Fred Burchett. We joined in 1991. And age now or age when we joined?
Both, or then.
Now, okay.
Whatever age you want to say.
Okay, I'm 66.
My name is Patty Neptune. I was born in 51. I'm 73. We came to Christ the King in 1978, and I am originally from a suburb of Chicago.
Hi, my name is Judy Klein, and I came to CTK 2 years ago, so 22 at the kind of end of the pandemic, and I am 65.
And I'm Howard Cunningham. Kathy and I joined in March, so about a month ago, and we were 72 at the time.
Let's give a round of applause to our panelists. All right, your first question or statement is, give us a moment that was a turning point in your life. A moment that was a turning point in your life. Who wants to go first?
Okay, I will. All right. First of all, I just want to say that I was raised a Catholic, went to parochial school through the 4th grade, and every day we went to church for school, and nighttime we did rosary, and that's how it was for my family, very religious. But the one thing, the word homosexual, gay, none of that was ever said. Never saw it on the news. We did watch the news, but I never saw it, and I never knew anything about it. And it wasn't until my 20s that the thing about seeing two guys together happened. And I still didn't understand what it meant. And it wasn't until my late 20s, when I was younger, I always felt this draw. Like there was something there, but I didn't know what it was. And it wasn't until my late 20s that I finally kind of recognized it. But at the time, though, there was AIDS happening. There was all this people telling you're gay and homosexual, you're bad, you could not go to heaven and everything. And it took me a while. But my final turning point was when I met someone, turned into my best friend, that helped me to understand and become open about it.
Well, my turning point was probably when I left my home. Most people go to college, but I got married. And I got married really young. And how young I was is I had my 18th birthday, and then 8 days later I was married. So I was extremely young. And I thought I was so smart, of course, still a teenager. And you learned a whole lot. So that would have probably be my turning point, being married so young and being away from parents.
My turning point was I was raised as a Greek Orthodox in Illinois. I grew up in a cocoon. My turning point was meeting Doug in college and realizing there were other people out there, other religions out there, meeting his family and learning about other religions. Doug was a Lutheran, and now so am I.
I would say my turning point was meeting my wife. I grew up Baptist in North Carolina, which is a very different experience than being a Lutheran. And Denise was a Lutheran, and therefore I became a Lutheran, and that kind of changed my life and perspective, and realized that some of these things I heard in the Baptist church maybe not exactly right.
Well, for me, I'm going to go with a younger one. So many of you may remember the draft lottery. And when I was 18, I was assigned draft lottery number 120. And in November of 1971, which was my primary year of draft eligibility, my Lucas County board went to number 116. So I was not drafted to serve in Southeast Asia, and was able to complete college and marry my sweetheart later on.
Oh, thank you for your honesty and for those answers. So now let's talk about what historical event do you think is a defining point of your generation? So what historical event is a defining point for your generation? Let's start down here with Howard.
Well, I'm going to stay in the same time frame. In the fall of 1975, Saigon fell. That was the end of the first war that the United States had ever lost. And that defined, for me, the way my generation would start their lives.
Skip. No. You know, I remember a lot of different events, and even the generation last week before us, they talked about JFK and Bobby Kennedy and the assassination. And I remember those things, but I was a kid. I was 5 and 10 years old, you know, when Bobby died. And so I remember more the impact of like what it did to my parents and things like that. I was still playing with Barbie dolls, you know. And so the historical events for me would be things that I actually went through and saw. And one of the things that came to mind was when I was working at IBM. And if you know anything about IBM, back in the 70s and 80s, they had a lot of contracts with NASA. And I remember when the space shuttle blew up, and I was living in Florida at the time, so I was right there, and you know, some of the engineers came to me and said, "Judy, come see," and you know, the space shuttle blew up. And I thought they were kidding me, because they were always doing that, and so, but I went with them, and I saw all these windows and all these engineers standing shoulder to shoulder and just crying. And that impacted me in so many different ways. And one of them is seeing men cry. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but that's it for me. Yeah.
For me, it was when JFK died. I was in 8th grade. I was 12 years old. And I remember complete silence in my classroom when we were told. I remember being horrified. I remember being sad. And I looked at my teacher and I just said, "Why?"
I agree with all of those, but I'm going to try to go somewhere else. I remember the moon program, and as a kid in school, you know, when the launches, they shut down the classrooms, and you always watch the launch, you take off, and then you always wanted it to be delayed, because that meant you got to watch TV a little longer before class started back. and then the night of the moon landing, I was at Boy Scout camp, and our scoutmaster had a battery-powered black and white TV, and we hiked 2 miles out of the camp back to the parking lot to watch the moon landing. And I've always been jealous of people who got to watch it on a big TV, you know, in real time, where we were, you know, we were like a 12-inch black and white TV that we walked out to watch. So that was, and then related to that, the movie Apollo 13 always just spoke to me, because it was like what engineers can do, what people can do to solve problems. And that just really spoke to me about problem solving and how you deal with tough situations.
Being the youngest of 4, my 2 older siblings were actually part of the silent generation. So the big age gap. A lot of things I saw and I remember too, it's like Kennedy being shot. I was in Japan when 9/11 happened. But he stole my thing, because I was thinking, to me, the biggest thing was the landing on the moon. and how that pulled people together.
Thank you for that. All right, I want you to think about inventions, because you've seen a lot of inventions in our lifetime, right? I'm a boomer. I didn't tell my age. I am 64. If you all have to tell your age, then I have to tell mine, right? So I'm 64. I'll be 65 in November, so I'm a boomer. So think about all the inventions we've seen. What would you imagine being without? If you could go back into our younger age and then not have this invention, how would that impact your life? Did that make any sense at all?
Well, I know the one.
Go ahead.
To me, and I think this really speaks out for everything, your phones, everything. If we didn't have the transistor, we wouldn't have what we have today. Used to be vacuum, all you little kids, you don't know what these are, called vacuum tubes. The vacuum tube were the transistor today. They're basically like a light bulb. If you didn't have that, nothing worked. But it was when things transitioned to transistors, which led to integrated circuits and that. We didn't have that. We don't have the technology we've got today.
So I'm going the opposite end of the spectrum, and I'm stealing from Karen Muse, who told me this was hers. Sunscreen.
Oh, yeah.
When we were kids, there was no such thing as sunscreen. So you just went out in the sun, and if you were fair, you burned to a crisp.
Yep.
And if you were not fair, you know, you were fortunate. But sunscreen really, I think, has helped save a lot of lives with skin cancer. The best stuff is what you steal.
Oh, I agree. My friend was very fair-skinned, and I was not. So she burned, and I did not. I'm going to have to say computers, because sometimes I think life was easier without, but sometimes I think, oh, I'm so glad I've got it.
Yeah, I think the same type of technology, microchips. I think of even cars, you know, where you learned on a stick shift and maybe went to an automatic. And now my car, all I have to do is say, could you navigate to CTK, and you know, I don't have to brake or stay in a certain, it does the speed limit for me, and it parks for me. So, you know, I would have to say that type of technology.
For me, I guess it's just a follow-on. It's all semiconductors. If there was not solid-state electronics, I'm not an electrical engineer, and I'm not going to have a career. So I guess I'm going to be a farmer at that point if semiconductors don't exist.
Or you might be the one who invents it. Now. So think back to your time. How did people talk about God and church in your youth and now? How has the conversation about God and church changed for you?
Well, for me, in our household, we didn't really talk about God. My father, you know, didn't go to church or didn't really talk about his belief. And my mother, I always say, had the flavor of the month. I mean, we went to not Christ the King, but Church of God, Church of Christ, you know, just different types of churches. And, you know, so we really just didn't talk about it. And as a child, I hated going to church because we did go to so many different churches, and I was always scared and afraid of church. And now how it's transitioned as church is with me all the time. I can be in Wegmans and not know where something is, and so I go up to a stranger and ask them. And I can just see in their eyes that they're, you know, something's amiss with them. And so, you know, I'll ask them if they're okay. And so this person starts talking to me, you know, about how they're not okay, but gives me just a little bit of information. And then I say to them something about, well, you know, would you like to pray now, or I'll pray for you. And then all of a sudden they just open up. The floodgates just open up because they know that, you know, this may be a Christian, and And so now I think God is with me everywhere.
Well, as I mentioned, I grew up Greek Orthodox. This is the way it is, and this is the way it will be, is the way it was when we went to church. 45 plus years at Christ the King. Oh, we get to talk about everything and anything. We are accepting of everyone and anything, and it's so much better.
I mean, I definitely came from a family that was completely secular. God fundamentally didn't exist, and church didn't exist either. That has obviously changed over the years. That's why I guess I'm partly why I'm sitting here.
I grew up surrounded by a family that was very faith-oriented. I have a number of relatives who are officers in the Salvation Army who we would go visit and see their churches and their families. So we talked about God a lot, and I still kind of enjoy the Salvation Army. It's a very different worship experience if you've ever had the so it was a big part of our life. It was a big part of, and I always said having a big family, lots of relatives. I got exposed to funerals at a very early age. I think I've attended one funeral every year for like 30 plus years. So God was a big part of our life growing up. And it still is in my life today, and I think it's what has helped me live my life the way it is.
I guess for me, it was a wild gambit as to how things went. Like I said, Catholic Church and everything. The pastor we had there in Wyandotte, Michigan, was very nice. He was really good, kind of open about stuff. Of course, never talked about homosexuality or anything, but I remember as a kid, the community going on, and we'd be sharing animal cookies. And they would say, here's your communion. And the pastor even heard that one and says, oh, I got competition. But, so he was really nice about it. But in school, we had nuns that would slap our hands with rulers. You did anything wrong. And very strict about the religion teaching and everything. And then later on, when I finally started to understand who it was, there was an assistant pastor in the church that I finally realized he was gay, and he and I were able to talk. But then he left, and the new priest came in, no, totally against everything. And so it went through up and down cycles, but then it come here. Churches like this, and there was one in Peoria before we left. Very open, very accepting in that. And it's like, it doesn't matter what religion you are. You have to accept people who they are and not push your values or your ideas on them. Take them for what they are, because basically everyone has the same ideals to live in harmony and be good to each other.
Thank you for those answers. So how has your taste of food, music, or culture shifted over the years? How has your taste of food, music, or culture shifted over the years?
Well, I think I eat healthier, more nutritious than I did growing up. I know more about it and so forth. Music, I'm sorry, I'm unchanged. I was a rock and roller from the beginning, and I still am. Sorry for the traditional music people, I don't mean to insult. Culture. I've learned a lot in the last 10 years. I was raised in a family that we would call them racist and homophobic today. I mean, I would own that. And I have found myself being able to work through that. It all started, when I went to work for a Japanese company, one of my best friends was Japanese. But my father served in the Pacific in the Second World War, and he had another term for people from Japan. So I've grown to, I think I've grown to understand that we are all beautiful children of God. No matter the color, no matter your gender identity or sexual orientation, we're all children of God. That's a change in culture, not as much a religious kind of thing?
Music, I still love Johnny Mathis, and my mother used to play him all the time, and I played it at her funeral even because I just love Johnny Mathis. Food, I still like carbohydrates, and but I do not like mint. I hate the smell of mint, and she put something in her mouth that was minty. and I'm like, just the smell just upsets my stomach. I don't know why. There's something that must have happened when I was a child. But and then culture, the thing that I remember growing up was I went to a school and lived in a neighborhood where there were no black people at all. And I remember one day a black young man came in our neighborhood that was a friend of a friend down the street, and he taught me how to shag, to dance. And my father came home at that time, and he saw me, and I heard him say, "Judy," and so I went in at the house. And he told me that I wasn't supposed to touch this young man. And I didn't know how to go back outside and to be with this person, and not touch his hand. But I did. I was brave enough to go outside. But I sat on the grass, and I wasn't brave enough to continue dancing. And now I think about that time and what I know now, and I would have danced.
Well, our food when I was growing up was very ethnic. And going to college, I was exposed to lots more, so it was awesome. And I like the lots more now. As far as the culture, I too grew up in a very racist, homophobic, bigoted home, a very Archie Bunker home. My parents also had names for ethnic groups that when I look back, I'm just horrified, thinking that this is how they referred to people. And I've already forgotten what the third thing is. Culture. Well, music. It was music. I love the Beatles. I love the Beatles. Still do. But at this age, I love listening to smooth jazz.
I was what you would call a picky eater as a child. I would eat anything as long as it was French fries. My first trip to a cafeteria, I thought was so cool. You could pick anything you want. I got mashed potatoes, French fries, and macaroni and cheese. And my mother said, "You can't do that. Something has to go back." So my food choices have definitely changed. I eat most anything now that's not green. I think one thing about culture that's changed, I grew up in rural North Carolina, and I think there's this stereotype that North Carolina was a racist place. And it may have been, but it wasn't where I was. In the 70s, I went to a high school that was like 20% black, and the student body president was black. He was also the starter on the basketball team. And he was killed in an automobile accident over our Christmas break. And that just had a profound impact on me, going to his home and going to the ceremony and being in the definite minority. I was the white 18-year-old in a church and room full of blacks, and it really it made an impact on me, but we never had that names. My parents said that there are lousy white people and there are lousy black people. Just, it's you don't judge people by their color, you judge them by who they are. And the last thing that I like to tell about culture is when I was 17, I drove a high school bus. I drove kids to school, and people today are like, "What?" And it's like, "What do you mean? You let a 17-year-old drive a bus full of elementary kids?" Well, I had been driving motorcycles and farm trucks and tractors since I was 12, so a bus didn't seem like that big a deal. But again, that's how things have changed.
Food. I still hate liver and onions. My mom stayed at home. She worked before they got married, but after World War II, excuse me, my mom stayed at home. She made dinner every day, and we were always expected to be there. And she would put out how much food every time. Each of us want more. You got more, but we ate what was on the plate. We didn't get to choose what we got to eat. It was made for us. And that, to me, that's one of the biggest cultural changes today. You see what parents do today. It's like, oh, whatever the kid wants. No, it wasn't for us. It was whatever the mom made, we ate. And really, the food was great, except the liver and onions. And I still had to eat one piece of liver, but I ate a whole pound of bacon with it. So culturally, that's one thing. But the music, full gambit. Growing up, it was Lawrence Welk. Every week, we had to listen to the Lawrence Welk show. And my parents, what's that? And then the three, yeah. Younger kids, if you get a chance, watch it. And then you'll never want to see it again. But, listening to Cash, all that, my parents played a lot of that. But then it wasn't until my high school years I started hearing rock music. So then I fell in love with the Beatles and everything. But then in my 20s, so early 20s, was the whole thing with country. And so I kind of switched over in the country for a while, and now then back to rock and more than the new age. And today it's whatever, except I do not like old style country or rap. No.
Thank you for those answers. So, what do you look for or value in a faith community? What do you look for or value in a faith community? Somebody in the middle want to start?
Well, it's got to have rock and roll music, and it has to be an inclusive congregation. I mean, we chose Christ the King because this is a reconciling in Christ congregation, one of 3 in the area. So those are the things we look for. And Pastor Pam being here is always nice, too.
I guess Christ the King has grown since we started coming here 45 plus years ago, and they share all my ethics, all my morals, all my values. And the other thing I just love is our fellowship with other couples in the church. Oh, and the ladies of the church. Absolutely.
We just went to ladies' night out. Yeah, I definitely think it's the people. You can have a good sermon, and that'll bring you in. But I think what keeps you here, are the people, how warm and compassionate they are. And that there's wisdom, here too. And you want to be around those people and situations.
I will say that we came here in 1991 and dropped by the church, and who drops by the church? But we dropped by, and no pastors were here, but we met Hazel Slocum. And Hazel was the one that recruited us and was great to us and showed us around the church. And I think, echoing what others have said, it's people with similar values and beliefs. It's you feel comfortable. These are the people you want to be around, not only in church but outside of church. And we have a lot of friends that I would say our group of friends is from church. That's who we do things with. So.
For me, it's a church that is open to everyone. Does not tell you can't do something or can't be there because of who you are. One that also helps people. I have seen churches that preach it. So yeah, we help people, and you actually look, they don't at all. Because if we don't help each other, whoever it is, especially those who are in need, why are we here?
Thank you. So what do you think is the toughest or the scariest issue facing our generation today, the boomers? What do you think is the toughest or the scariest issue facing the boomers today?
Facing us.
I'll start. Again, I got help. I asked my wife to discuss this, and like I said, the best stuff is what you steal. But what she pointed out, and I totally agree with, is the growth in income inequality. My parents led a middle-class lifestyle in North Carolina. They owned their home. They sent their kids to college. My father didn't have a college degree. My mother was a stay-at-home mom when we were young. And they were able to achieve that lifestyle that it's almost impossible today. It's almost impossible to have one income live a middle-class lifestyle. And it seems like our economy and the way our society is set up, we're making income inequality even worse. We're not doing things to redistribute wealth. We're not making it easier for the poor, disadvantaged people. It seems like our society is putting up barriers, and I think that's a real problem.
Well, for me, it's health, and it's not just physical, it's mental health also. And, for me, that's kind of scary because the people that have the money can then afford different types of mental health and therapies, and just like you said, there are so many people out there that don't have that advantage. So definitely mental health. And then another one for me is technology. We talked about it before. We've come so far, but yet that is scary for me also because I remember something that Ralph Nader's mother said on a show one time, Phil Donahue's show, and she said something about how people interact with machines and not each other, and that's scary for me, which also has to do with mental health.
Yeah, so for me, as I look through the life, I think our medical technology has figured out how to extend the quantity of our life. They can make me live to be 100. We haven't addressed the quality of my life that last 10 years. And I've seen times when we don't do our elderly, since I'm getting to be one, a service by artificially extending their lives when the quality of their life has so declined.
The first thing that popped into my mind for this question was AI. I am frightened about AI.
Well, first of all, that was not on the list of questions Pastor Dan sent me. No problem, no problem. There's multiple things come to mind as what worries me from my generation. Health being one, government making decisions for, I'm going to talk about women here, making decisions for women which they have no business doing, period. It's not their right to do that. And them saying, hey, we can't give you the money for this stuff, but if you look at long-term cost, it's cheaper to provide health care up front than it is to do health care long-term, much cheaper. And if they would get their heads out of where, they would finally come to realize it. But on the other side of the coin, I'm going to go to one other thing, though, too, is part that worries me with the younger generation. It's a progression that's been happening over the years where it's become more of me, me, me. What can you give me? And I remember as a kid, I was lucky to get maybe 2-3 toys a year, period. Now it's like Christmas time, it's 20, 30 gifts. And it worries me because it's becoming such that the amount of money being spent is overtaxing the parents in that.
So what fills you with hope?
People, and not just children and younger generations, but it's just people, everyone. And then, of course, God.
Actually, I don't have a lot of hope. I see us in a country where thinking is not what we do. We don't deal with nuances well. We're real good at being polarized. We're real good at marching up and down, whether you're red or blue. I don't care which way. And yet I think I see very little sign of any real thinking or nuances of compromise and things like that. And when I see a young person who will engage in that kind of nuanced thinking, it gives me hope. When I see people marching up and down with signs, manipulating the media, I'm hopeless. I am worried that the democracy, the experiment we call democracy in this country, could very well come to an end. And that's, to me, is a part of me that I don't want to see end. So critical thinking, there are nuances in what we're doing, and we need to encourage the young people to think that way.
I think what gives me hope is my faith. In challenging times, I rely on my faith and my church community to get me through the hard issues. I've often said I don't know how people who are not in faith community deal with bad things. It's what gets me through. And I read Martin Luther King said the arc of the moral universe is long but bends towards justice. And I interpret this to mean that, it's going to take a while, but things are going to work out okay. And we just have to be patient and trust God is going to work out.
Go ahead.
I too would say my faith. And to add to that, though, as an educator, I would say children, all children. I've had wonderful conversations with my oldest grandchild, who's almost 17, about what's going on in our world today. And he is very thoughtful about what he's thinking and saying and the questions he's asking. So I just have hope in them.
I have mixed feelings about the future, about stuff, as other people already said. We lived out in the country in Michigan as I grew up, and we tried to recycle as much as we could. Back then, all was steel cans, aluminum cans, and newspapers, but we still did it. I'm here. I loved it when we moved here. Of course, I know where some of the stuff was going, but still, the idea of trying to recycle and everything. So what gives me hope is the people in the younger generation, and it's up to the younger generation. I hope you're listening. This is up to you guys, because our time here on earth is nearing an end. But it's up to you guys to steer this country and the world away from using stuff like oil and everything, because this planet is finite. We don't have unlimited resources. And to clean up the mess and to clean up the politics of what's happening, this polarization. I don't know if anyone else has ever read the book about George Washington's final statement to his troops, but he foresaw what's happening today. He told us, because things are going to become polarized, and so once that happens, things are going to start breaking down. So everything happened today, he saw back then in his final address to his troops. But I still have hope, and it is the younger generation. You guys are the ones who have to step up and make your voices heard, and a lot of them already are. A lot of them already are. It just takes more.
Thank you to our panel this morning. Let's express some appreciation. What very thoughtful answers you've provided as you've been thinking about these questions. And we really appreciate you taking the time and being vulnerable and sitting on this panel and sharing a bit of your thoughts, your hopes, your dreams, your fears, all of that, because that is what makes us Christ the King and what makes us people. So thank you. Thank you for being so vulnerable.
Amen.
I'm going to take a mug shot.
Yeah, it's
Mug
a
shot.
picture.
Better not be posted in a police station. Yeah.
Thanks, Haley. Well, I'm really enjoying these panels. I know that you are too. Thank you for coming back and being part of this. Next week, we're moving on to the forgotten generation, the Gen Xers out there, born 1965 to 1979. If If you would like to be on the Gen X panel, I'm looking for 4 panelists for next week, so come let me know. We're looking at, we're going to go down to every generation, Gen X, and millennials, Gen Z, who are young adults right now, and then Gen Alpha, which is the youngest generation, and there's a new one being born now. So somebody being born today would probably be Gen Beta at this point. So you're going to get to know some that you probably don't know very well. We may switch a couple of those weeks around, so we might not be in that order just because the camping trip is in the middle of that, and we want our younger folks to really be out here and in good numbers. So come back next week for the Gen X group, and if you'd like to be in it, let us know. Let's finish with a word of prayer. The Lord be with you. God, throughout time, we give you thanks that you call us in our various points of life. We ask that you be with all of us, that we might learn and glean from the wisdom and hope of others in order to work together in this time and in this place. God, we are all on the same path. Some have been on for a long time, some have been on for a short time, but we're all on this path at this time together. Bless this church that is the unity of those people in your holy name, that we might continue to serve you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right. Great day at CTK.